Okay, all right. You've landed on Island 49. I'm your host, Weston Smith. This evening, I want to talk about what you're all talking about, what everybody's talking about in the 49er content world. And it's the recent, I don't want to say backpedaling, but the recent clarification brought to the surface on the Pat McAfee show by Ian Rappaport, talking about how the 49ers brass had reached out and pushed back against Ian Rappaport with his reporting of potentially Sam Darnold being the front runner to start week one for the San Francisco 49ers should Brock Purdy not be healthy over Trey Lance. First and foremost, happy birthday to Trey Lance. 23 years young. I'd give anything to be 23 years old again. That was many, many, many moons ago. But I think there's some points of clarification that need to take place. First and foremost, you didn't hear, at least I didn't hear, Ian back off of his comments. He just mentioned that the 49er brass had reached out and basically said, you're pushing a false narrative. There's a ton of belief in this building around Trey Lance, his capability, especially when you go back to, hey, like to start the 2022 season, they handed him the keys, right? They were trying to walk Jimmy G out of the building and they wanted it to be the Trey Lance show, and then injury after injury. And then you got a glimpse of what Brock Purdy is potentially capable of, albeit still a small sample size, larger than Trey's, but still a small sample size. So I think it's interesting to try to pick apart, like, why now, right? I'm gonna give credit where credit's due. So this is a shout out to Rob Stats Guerrero, who does a phenomenal job on his pod. But he tried to break down a little bit of a timeline as to, okay, when did these comments come out from Ian? So you go all the way back to the end of March. I think he labeled the 28th or the 29th of March, that he came out and said that there's sentiment within the building that bringing Sam Darnold in means that Sam Darnold's going to be the front runner to be QB1 through camp, while you're waiting to see how Brock progresses through his rehabilitation and, when he might be ready to get back into the lineup. And then it was mentioned again during the draft when speculation picked up, hey, could the 49ers potentially over the 4-day weekend move on from Trey Lance should they find suitors and somebody willing to offer up a fair package for him that might entice the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition. And now here we are, today's May 9th, right? So I think it was May 8th, late on May 8th, where this was actually said and talked about. So it is an interesting timeline. I think what's very interesting to me is I still don't even know if I believe Ian Rappaport that the 49ers brass reached out to him to clarify this. I've talked about it before, left comments on this. You've seen other content creators come out and say 49ers don't owe it to anybody in the media to clarify anything that the media is reporting on. We know what season it is. It's smoke season, right? It's the lull of the offseason. Free agency has come and gone. The draft has now come and gone. You're building up a lot of hype going into those key events. And now we sit and wait through OTAs till we get to camp to see some of these battles take place and come to fruition. So I never put a lot of stock into what's talked about in April and May. More often than not, those things don't come to light. It's speculation. It's stirring the pot. It's let's generate some clicks. And all of that makes sense to me. I get it. That's why I don't put that much stock into it. But I also have always felt that, the media is going to stir their own pot, right? Like, as long as there's open dialogue taking place inside of the building. So if the 49ers brass is clearly communicating to Trey, to Sam, to Brock, whatever the scenario is, Brock, you're going to be QB1 if you're healthy, or Trey, you're going to get every opportunity to be QB1 to kick off this season. If you play well, we'll keep rolling with you, man. That's why we invested into you. Or Sam, we brought you in to win this job. We think you're the best thrower of the football that we've ever had. I'm saying this kind of tongue in cheek. Should have thrown air quotes around it because I don't for a second. I've been around watching a lot of 49er football. Sam Darnold's not the best thrower of the football that the San Francisco 49ers will ever have. I don't care how you spin it. No pun intended. But if those conversations are taking place, like, who cares what the media is speculating about? These are professionals. They're having open dialogue. The thought is it's honest dialogue, employer to employee, saying like, this is the game plan, be on board, right? Like whatever the scenario might be. So, and I felt like the 49ers have always done, like they don't need to reach out to communicate like, guys, you're spewing the wrong narrative. Like, why do they care? So if they did reach out to Ian, that's where I'm most concerned. It's not that like, hey, this guy, Ian Rappaport, is pushing a false narrative. Who cares? Everybody's pushing a false narrative this time of year. But if they did actually reach out, and they did reach out to say, hey, stop, like we believe in Trey, whatever it is, why and when, right? Did that happen a month ago and Ian's just sharing that? Did that happen over the weekend and Ian is sharing that on a Monday with an announcement? And then why? Are they trying to protect a fragile ego of a now 23-year-old? I don't know. And anything that I would say would be conjecture and pure speculation. But those are the questions that if I was in the room and I had access to Kyle Shanahan and I had access to John Lynch, that I would be asking. Why? Why did you feel it was imperative to reach out to somebody whose job professionally is to stir the pot? Right. That's what they all get paid to do. And what we all try to do is just spark conversation and dialogue to get us to the season. Why did you need to tell that individual that they need to pump the brakes or backpedal or, you know, reassess their statements, whatever the case might be? That is where my question lies. What damage do they feel is being done by Ian Rappaport out there? Are they destroying, again, a fragile ego of a young 23-year-old quarterback in the NFL? Are they diminishing trade value of a young quarterback in the NFL? I don't know. I don't know where their concerns lie, but this is where this is my belief, right? And this is, obviously not a knock on Ian Rappaport in any shape or form. I don't think they reached out. I don't think they reached out. I just think it's lying season. That's where we are when it comes to the NFL. Like, again, how would it behoove them in any capacity whatsoever to reach out to a media figure that they don't necessarily have this direct one-to-one relationship that doesn't just cover the San Francisco 49ers like maybe a Matt Maiocco does, right? Where they've always talked about that Matt is kind of could be a potential mouthpiece of the 49ers. So since he's so tightly knit, in that locker room and knows these guys and has been covering this team for a long, long time. Like, why the need? Why now? What's the motivation for the brass to reach out if they did even reach out? All that being said, we're exactly where I've been saying and other people have been saying that we are months ago. Nobody knows anything. We don't know anything. And that's the frustration, right? And I think that's where the story is trying to be created and a narrative is trying to be determined is around the quarterback position for the San Francisco 49ers, whether it's uncertainty, controversy, whatever term you want to use. There is so many unknowns. You have 4 starts from a guy that you invested multiple first round picks to go get, and you took 3 overall. Then you have 8 starts from a guy who looked really, really good. And I would argue that the team was playing really, really well and clicking on all cylinders prior to Brock getting into, the starting lineup due to Jimmy's injury. But he got 8 starts and he looked pretty good. And then you bring in this guy, Sam Darnold, with all this speculation. And, I never knock an NFL player. These guys are super talented, whether they're on the practice squad or they crack a 53-man roster or they're your starting quarterback. They're all insanely talented to even be playing at that level. But the truth is the body of work, which is much larger for Sam Darnold, is not super impressive. It wasn't in college. I think he's got intangibles, a big arm, a big body, things of that. His decision-making is really not that great. And everybody wants to tout this stretch that he had at the last season. That was mediocre at best. It's certainly not what I would be putting my eggs in terms of hopes of carrying us through the NFC all the way to the Super Bowl. So we're back where we were when the season ended, when Brock went down with the injury. Now what? Right? The unknown is we still don't know how Brock's going to recover from that. He hasn't even began throwing the football yet. Will there be setbacks around him throwing the football? Still have to get to camp. by all calculations, on the rehab timeline, Brock won't be ready for camp. He's going to miss the majority of camp. Is Trey going to take that opportunity? Is Sam going to take advantage of that opportunity? We don't know. The truth is, all of this is going to be hashed out once camp starts, not in OTAs and shorts and t-shirts and helmets, but when pads come on. When the number one offense is lining up against the number one defense in camp, in 100-degree weather, where they're just ramming their heads into one another, that's when we're going to see how this thing is going to shake out. But the truth is, none of us know anything. We don't know anything. We can speculate all we want. We can go off of history. We can read the tea leaves or between the lines, whatever terminology kind of tickles your fancy. But the truth is, where we sit here as of, I'm on the East Coast, 9:43 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we know the same that we knew in the middle of February. Nothing. Literally nothing. We have no idea who QB1 for the 2023 season is going to be. Now, I'll say this. If the narrative is true and the San Francisco 49ers brass did reach out to Ian Rappaport and asked him to set the record straight or pump the brakes on that narrative, that does bode well or better for Trey Lance, right? I think there's a clear window. I'll still say this. I still say that this team, based on how the end of the season ended last year, is certainly erring on the side of a healthy Brock Purdy is probably our QB1. And there's so many people out there being like, oh, Brock played elite and da-da-da-da. Did he really? He played on a really good football team with a really good defense, a bunch of playmakers. And to me, he made a couple plays, right? Off script plays. He absolutely did, right? More so than we ever saw from his predecessor, number 10. But that being said, was he elite? No. Did he spur enough to say that's the guy that can beat Patrick Mahomes? Not in my opinion. Or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or anybody who might make it, Joe Burrow, anybody who might make it out of the AFC to represent that conference in the Super Bowl. The answer is no. So I still have to err on the side of who's got the plus upside? And to me, that's still Trey. And what's the knock on Trey? There's no sample size. Dude hasn't played enough football. Let's let him play some football, right? Don't rush Brock back from this injury that we know nothing about from an NFL quarterback perspective and how it might sideline, affect the throw. Will that injury linger and lead to a Tommy John surgery at the end of the year or in the middle of the year? Let the guy get right and then let him compete. He's earned the right to compete for that QB1 spot. I'll never take that away from him. But I have to feel like if I'm the 49ers, now is the time to get behind number 5 and say, we have all the confidence in the world. We showed it to you last year by putting you in and saying this was your team. We understand some unfortunate things took place around your injury and then a backup coming in and playing really good football in your absence. But with what we know today, not pontificating of how this injury might go or foreshadowing how Brock might recover. With what we know today, number 5, we are behind you. We will give you the resources. We believe in your talent like we always have. It's time to play football. And we're going to give you every opportunity to go win your job back. And if you don't, that's on you. That's not on us. Right? We want to. Now, I could say that there are things that the 49ers have done wrong since drafting Trey Lance that make us be in this scenario or in the scenario that we find ourselves in at this moment in time. But that's for another day. That's for when we get closer to camp. But right now, the question that's top of mind for the last few years for the 49ers, who is QB1, right? We don't know. But if I'm sitting in that office, I can tell you who in those offices at 4949 Centennial Boulevard, I can tell you who my betting favorite is. And it's still number 5. There's just plus attributes on that individual that I can't ignore that were sexy enough to entice me to invest multiple first round picks to move up, to go get that guy at number 3 and doing a proper evaluation of all the quarterbacks that might have been available to me in that position to pick when I made the trade. I still got to ride with that. And I'm not riding with that based on oh, it's sunk costs. What happened? We flushed all that. That doesn't matter. That's an afterthought at this point in time. Like those picks are gone. They've come and gone, right? Heading into next year's draft, we are picking where we finish in our rounds, right? The Christian McCaffrey trade's in the rear view. The Trey Lance trade is in the rear view. We're moving forward. So I'm not worried about sunken costs. I'm worried about who's going to take my team to the next level. I listen, 3 out of 4 years finding ourselves in the NFC Championship game is super cool. It's really enjoyable. I've traveled on the road to some of these playoff games during this run, and it's been a lot of fun. And I love postseason football, specifically when my team is playing in it. But part of the reason why I'm a 49ers fan is I grew up in that era where Super Bowl championship was the standard. When they would lose in the NFC championship game those years to the Dallas Cowboys or even to the New York Giants, heads were held low. Sheer disappointment. And there's a lot of teams in the NFL that would be thrilled to make the playoffs, thrilled to play in a conference championship game. Not this team, not this franchise. The expectation is higher. So when I look at the roster, I say, who has the ability to take this really good depth chart and really good roster to the next level? How can you not say it's Trey? I just don't understand. Like, how can you not say he has it? Like, we know what the floor is. We know what Brock can do. When Trey was in there, we saw what he can do when he's getting into a rhythm and the offense is humming. Oh, by the way, he never played with Christian McCaffrey, right? When the running game and the offense coincidentally took off, Trey was already out for the season. He didn't get to see Ayuk kind of explode onto the scene in that back part of the year, or play all these games with George Kittle where Brock Purdy took tremendous advantage of having number 85 on the field with him. So there's still maybe a lot that I'm craving, and maybe that's why I lean that way. But I 49er fans, like, you want to win a Super Bowl, which we haven't done in 28 years, mind you. I think we got to be looking at 5. Looking at 13, like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, it just the plus side, like the attributes there, why you traded for this guy in the first place aren't there. Like, look, Brock, for being Mr. Irrelevant, came onto the scene, fantastic story. And don't misconstrue any of what I'm saying right now. You see what I wear and how I carry myself. I am a 49er fan first. I don't care who the quarterback is if they're winning, right? I start to care a little bit more when I think there's things being left on the table. Not the quote unquote right decisions or the decisions that I can support as a fan. And that's my right as a fan, is to be hypercritical of those decisions and to be an armchair quarterback or a Monday morning quarterback or whatever term you might want to use for that. That's my right. I invest enough of my time and my emotion and money into this team that I can be hypercritical in those scenarios. So I just wanted to talk about this. Rewind here for a moment. If I go back to the Ian Rappaport scenario, I'm still skeptical. I was skeptical about the initial narrative. I'm still skeptical about if the 49ers brass even reached out to them in the first place. Let's say they did. Kind of makes Ian a little bit of a liar, right? Like, hey, you're just pushing this narrative because it's your own agenda, and you didn't get that from anybody here. So if that's the scenario, why wouldn't he lie about this? Gives us something to talk about for 48, 72 hours, filling in for Pat McAfee on his show and have some juicy content. Like, that's the name of the game. But I put zero stock into it. I think the fact remains we are where we were in February, an unknown recovery timeline around an injury. And by all reports, he's progressing well. Still hasn't thrown a football. We'll see how that goes when we get to that point. But we're sitting with Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, some other camp bodies that will be brought in to hurl the rock around during camp. But to me, it's still Trey right now, right? And that's with the unknown. But I just never bought into this narrative. I kind of implored and urged you all to not follow, where there's smoke, there tends to be fire. Like, I get all that, but it's really easy to pick apart. It's like low hanging fruit to kind of shit on the 49ers in this QB controversy and scenario, because it's just been there and it doesn't go away. And that's the frustrating part for fans. And that's why we will latch on to anything that any of these folks say about our quarterback position. We feel really comfortable with the rest of the field, plus or minus a few spots. But in the most important position in all of sports, huge question mark for a team that has expectations to compete year after year after year for that Lombardi trophy. So that's all I wanted to jump in here. I would say don't invest too much time into it. Don't even invest the 20 minutes that I just invested in. Certainly give it a listen. Please please subscribe to the channel. Certainly want to be bringing you more and more content. I'm going to have more and more guests on as well. Stay tuned. I'm going to release another video tomorrow with a surprise guest. But appreciate all y'all's times. Please comment. Tell me your thoughts, rip me apart, shred it. I'm always open for the conversation. I promise if your opinion is different than mine, that does not mean that we can't speak about it and we can't have friendly conjecture back and forth about why you believe what you believe. And I'll share why I believe we are entitled to that. And there's no reason to attack others for their beliefs about a sport, a game that kids play, right? That adults happen to make a lot of money to be able to play. This is Island 49. Again, I'm Weston Smith. Appreciate you tuning in.